We begin in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, and we send salutations and peace on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, through which every single good has come to us. Israel, Palestine, war, 2023. On the 7th of October, 2023, things changed drastically in regards to this ongoing problem that has been going on at the heart of the Muslim Ummah. This is precisely what needs to be addressed from the members all around the world. Over the next few khutbahs, we are going to be addressing this issue, looking at the issue from its very core, starting from the history of this conflict, and understanding ourselves what we need to know as a ummah, whether it be an ummah inside a Muslim land or whether it be in a non-Muslim land, like here, Australia. I am very sad to see that those people that do not keep a very deep insight into this issue of Israel and Palestine, that perhaps there is a haqq, there is some right, maybe there is an authority, maybe there is a need, that the Jews deserve to have this land in the first place. Do they have a haqq over this land? This is the question that I want to address today. And inshallah, over the next few khutbahs, we are going to take a break from the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, and we are going to delve deep into the historical accounts, because if today you are to ask a Jewish scholar, alhamdulillah, I am in contact with Jewish scholars. We often have dialogues, we have interfaith dialogues, we have times where we speak to Christians, we speak to Jews, and we have Muslim representatives. These are known as the Abrahamic faiths. We will look at the millah, the sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and see who is the one that has a true claim to this land in the first place. Now, today, we want to discuss from the history of the three tribes that we discussed previously, Banu Qaynuqa, Banu Nadir, and Banu Qurayza. These were the three Jewish tribes that were living in and around Medina itself. Medina was the first Islamic state. And because it was the first Islamic state, we saw that there was actually a treaty formed by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with the Jews to live in peace. However, each tribe in their own time broke the treaty one after the other, and that was the only reason why we had a problem with the Jews to start off with. This is not personal. This is not a racist attack. This is not that if a Jewish brother wants to become a Muslim, ahlan wa sahlan. But we need to know our history, because today, my dear brothers and sisters, we are severed from our history. And that is the thing that I wanted to address today, this question of whether, when you ask a Jewish scholar or a Jewish person, when they say that we have a claim to this land, which is known as Palestine, we have a higher claim to this land, we want to unpackage this question and see whether they actually have a claim or whether this, what is said, is false. So, Banu Israel is established in this land today, 2023. Can Israelis, or in other words, the Jews, the people inside Palestine, can they stay as brothers together with the Muslims? Is this possible? When we look into this, we will find that there's a deep history. And this history is about credibility. Why have the Jews said that this is our land, to start off with? Jews only started inhabiting this land in 1947, when the UN partitioned Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab or a Muslim state. Armed Jewish groups not only held off poorly executed attacks around the areas around it, but they showed ruthless determination to acquire land by genocide, killing the people that used to stay there. So the Jews were never there forever. They were put there by who? After the UN partitioned Palestine in 1947. So how is it that the Jews claim that this was always our land? It is mentioned, and this is their claim in the Torah, their holy book, in the book of Genesis, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, and He has made a promise to Ibrahim alayhi salam, What? Ibrahim, I have given the place where the river of Misr, Egypt, Nile, the river Nile, all the way from here up until Iraq. I have gifted this whole area to Ibrahim alayhi salam and his descendants. This is where it originates from. On the basis of this claim, the Christians and the Jews believe that Palestine is actually their land. And in this land, the government should be theirs. Why? Because this is the promise of Allah. It's mentioned in the Torah. They are wanting to make truth from this passage of the Torah. Now let's look at it. There are two angles that you can prove this. One is looking at it from the nationalistic point of view. The nationalistic point of view is that the Jewish people say that this was the place that we established first. We started living in this place first. That is the first way you can look at it. Perhaps that's the case. The second way that you can look at it is that there is a religious angle to why they are established in the Jewish lands. So, Palestine, in the first place in 1947, why did they put them there in the first place? They said that they had some kind of claim, and they gave this as the dalil that we were the original people that were here before. So the UN agreed, and they gave them their portion of it. Now I'm going to look at both of these angles in this khutbah. Let's look at the nationalistic angle. We always used to be here. 2,000 years from this day, the Jews claim that they were living in this land. Therefore, they are the true heirs of this land. We were here before. Now, we live in Australia. Who was here before us? Aborigines, right? Aborigines, Torres Strait Islanders. That is why to this day, even though they were grossly conquered and they were, their lands were taken, we still pay homage to them now because they were the original people that were here on this land before we got here. And by we, I mean the European settlers. So now, many years after, we still understand that that was the original location of someone else. Now, this can be said for an island like Australia. This can be said for an island like America. This can be said for an island like New Zealand. But this cannot be said for the middle of the earth, which is where Jerusalem, Mecca, Medina, Saudi Arabia, Levant, Lebanon, Jordan, these places lie in the middle of the world. The dating back of that goes in thousands of years, because humans have been settled in that area for a much longer period of time. This claim is incorrect. Why? Prior to 2,000 years, when the Jews claimed that they were there, the Arabs were already settled there. There are two Arab tribes, Qaba'il, that were already established in this area prior to the Jews getting there. Who are they? Pre-2,000 years. So 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. Yabus, Canaan. The Arabs that are from Palestine, they belong to one of these two tribes. Even now to this day, 2023, this is still the case. You can find the descendants. Furthermore, there is the mention of Yabus. The Jews claim that because Yabus is where they get Yabusalam, which is actually the name Jerusalem. Where did the name Jerusalem come from? Have you ever thought of where did the name Jerusalem come from? It comes from the word Jerusalem, which comes from the word Yarus. And this is actually the history of this name. Yabus, the original word for it is Yoshalem in the Jewish scripture. Aushalem. This was a name of an idol, on the basis of which the name Jerusalem was actually coined. It was Jerusalem. This was taken from this. This is dating back to idol worship. Now you tell me, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam listening to this, did Jews used to worship idols? Because they have an entire scripture from Musa alayhi salam. They're supposed to be called the people of revelation. How are they going to worship idols? The idols were worshipped by who? The Arabs that used to live there before them. That is why the name Jerusalem was made. The simple fact that Jerusalem exists today means that the Arabs, these two tribes, were actually there prior to the Jews coming there. These two Arab tribes were present and they used to worship Yarush, Jerusalem, which is where Jerusalem comes from. It was their idol's name. It was these original Arab tribes that became Muslim after the coming of who? Ibrahim alayhi salam. And therefore, the rich tradition started from there, of Islam being there. Ibrahim alayhi salam came to this year many thousands of years after. So these Arab tribes were probably there 5,000, 7,000, 8,000 years prior to that. Ibrahim alayhi salam only came later on. In that area, he migrated. And they were idol worshippers. We know the famous story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. One thing that should be remembered is that in the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, human beings used to live a little longer than what we do. What is our average ages? 50 to 80 years of age, roughly. Most human beings only live this long. It is a historical fact that human beings used to live much longer than this. 100 years was short. So Ibrahim alayhi salam similarly, so many thousands of years ago, lived much more, approaching around 200 years or so. How long did he actually stay in this area of Jerusalem? 100 years in total. And the amount of time in his biography that he actually stayed in this area was 100 years. Now Ibrahim alayhi salam historically did not even own a piece of land in Jerusalem. In this entire 100-year period. In this area of Jerusalem. And then this is actually mentioned in the Torah as well. Ibrahim alayhi salam had a son Ishaq. And his son Yaqub alayhi salam. All three generations were staying in this area. What's the total number of time? Yaqub alayhi salam had 12 sons. 11 of them stayed in this area. And one of them, Yusuf alayhi salam, migrated to Egypt. Now at the time of Yusuf alayhi salam, when he became the governor of Egypt, the entire family moved from Jerusalem to Egypt. And it was only after they had finished their period in Egypt, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had willed, they moved back from Egypt to Jerusalem. This is the history. It is mentioned in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 20 onwards, in the Holy Quran. It was actually Musa alayhi salam that took these people that were settled in Egypt and took them towards the Holy Land, Jerusalem. Who took them there? From Egypt, they were settled there. He took them to. Now those people that stayed in Jerusalem at that time, when Musa alayhi salam ran away with these people, the Banu Israel, from Egypt. So remember, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he settled in Jerusalem, then they moved to Egypt. Why? Because of Yusuf alayhi salam. Now who brought them back? Musa alayhi salam. Now they were living as a second-class citizen in the rule of Fir'aun. Now Musa alayhi salam brings them back. And he says that this land over here, they're standing on the outside of Jerusalem now, this land over here is promised to you. But there's a condition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed if you want this land of Jerusalem. He has written this land for you, Banu Israel. He's leading the Jews, Musa alayhi salam. The condition is that you need to fight to acquire it. People may say that at this juncture, that even in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised the land of Jerusalem to who? Musa alayhi salam and Banu Israel. But there's a condition. What's the condition? You must fight in order to acquire Jerusalem. And at that time, the Banu Israel are being told by Prophet Musa, one of the 5 greatest prophets that ever lived, 114,000 or so prophets. In another narration, 140,000 prophets revealed. He is one of the 5 greatest ones of them, and he has just rescued them. He has parted the seas for them. Imagine, you are standing there, Fir'aun is coming, armed to the teeth. Standing there in front of you is an entire ocean. Musa alayhi salam is standing there, and the people started blaming him. You've wrecked it. You've really done it now, we're all going to die. We brought our women and children, we're slaves, we don't even know how to fight. And Musa alayhi salam takes a regular stick and splashes it on the water. I told the students that I teach between 5 and 15 years of age in Maktab, that go, the next time you go to the beach, take a stick and splash it in the water. See if this happens. What happened? The two leaves of the ocean just went up in midair. And they walked safely through, and Fir'aun's army tried to do the same thing, and it collapsed on them. Everyone died, including Fir'aun. The account is readily available in historical reports. This is fact. This is how Fir'aun died. This is how his entire army died. Now, if you were standing there, I want you to just ask yourself this question, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam. If you were standing there next to Musa alayhi salam when he did such a miraculous event, would you ever doubt this man again? If he told me to stand on one leg, I would stand on one leg until I died. Because he just performed something that no human being in the history of human beings can do. And the only way a human being can perform such a miracle at the time of need, on demand, is when they have ta'alluq, they have relationship with the one who created this entire earth. Because now the rules of physics are being bent. The rules of physics, the rules of gravity are now being bent. So the only way that this man, Musa alayhi salam, could have done this is that he is in direct relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, meaning that he's a true prophet. Now imagine fast forward to the time that they have escaped. Musa alayhi salam has successfully gone away with Banu Israel. They are standing outside Jerusalem, and now this same prophet gave them a command. He said, this land, Jerusalem, has been promised to you, Banu Israel, but you need to fight for it. What was their reply? After seeing a huge miracle, they just got saved. Their necks were saved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They said, no, Musa. No. If you're thinking that we're going to go and fight inside Jerusalem, you're crazy. There's two tribes that live there, and they're very strong. They're very well built. Arabs. You think we're going to fight them? You're crazy. Why don't you go with your Lord and fight them? And when the fight is over, come and get us. We are not going to fight. Why don't you, Musa, go and fight with your Lord and we'll stay behind? So subhanallah, even in the time that they have a prophet among them, they refuse to follow the command of Musa alayhi salam and fight the people in that time to claim the land of Jerusalem. They forfeited their right of having Jerusalem at that time. Done. They didn't fight. So this point is categorically proven that Jews have no right to this land in the first place. There were conditions placed by Allah. One condition. To Prophet Musa alayhi salam. And they failed to fulfill those conditions. This land now does not belong to them. As for them staying in that land for a period of time, 2,000 years before this day, they only came to this land as foreigners. These two Arab tribes were already there, residing in that land. They have a greater right to have the land of Jerusalem than the Jews. It is even a historical fact. Did you know? Zionism. Who founded Zionists? Who founded this Zionism? Theodore Randolph. And when he founded Zionism, what is Zionism, by the way? Zionism is when a group of Jews got together and they're like, we need a Jewish state. We need a Jewish state. We need an actual place where we can call home. This person founded this whole mentality. This is what a Zionist is. He used to be a journalist. He was a social activist. Once he founded this group called Zionism. He said that we now need a place. In order for us Jews to live in peace, we need to have a state. Even at that time, when the founder of Zionism himself was thinking of locations around earth that they can make the Jewish state, Israel, they didn't even think about Jerusalem. There were actually various conferences among the Jews that were conducted, among the Zionists. And the first place that they chose to become the new Israel was what? It was Mozambique. And then after that, they chose Congo in Africa in order to become the new Jewish state. And remember, The only reason that these places were considered was because they were a portion of the European Union, the Allied Union, and they had very good relations with them. So they could offer them this piece of land in Congo or in Africa, in Mozambique. And remember, even so many years later, they won't need to fight, because they're going to be handed it on a silver platter, so they don't need to fight. Even so many years later, they don't want to fight for that land. So they convinced them, then give us this piece of land to establish a Jewish state. In 1901, they looked at Cyprus. So every time the Zionists got together in these meetings, they wouldn't agree. They're like, Mozambique, yeah, they went back and forth, no, we don't agree. Congo in Africa, no, we don't agree. Then they tried Cyprus in 1902. The area of Sena, which is located in Egypt, was considered by the Zionists. In 1903, Uganda. Every time the Jews would meet, they would not reach a conclusion. They had tried in different areas to establish Israel. And then it was only after this, in 1903 to 1904, that they said, we're going to go to Jerusalem. We're going to establish our Israeli state there. The Jews and the Zionists were not able to agree until Jerusalem. Why? Do you know why? Because there was a large amount of Jews that were already settled in Russia. And there was a large amount of Jews that were settled in Europe. And because they were already in the middle of earth, they didn't want to leave this area, to go all the way to Africa, to go all the way to Mozambique. So they were conveniently located in the middle of the world. And they didn't want to leave this area. So that was the first time that the Jews actually settled and said, yes, Jerusalem is a good place. We want that. So the Zionists agreed, and at that time, the two Arab tribes that I spoke of were already living in that area. It was their home. Now they convinced the European allies to give them a portion of Jerusalem. Not all of Jerusalem, just a small portion on the side of Jerusalem. Just give us a small portion and we'll be happy. Okay? We'll establish our Jewish state. And then the proof that they used was the religious proof. They said that this is the place that Sulaiman al-Islam used to be. And it is mentioned in our holy book, in the Torah. We've already gone through, this land is belonging to us. They made a strong case and they were handed over this land, which was already belonging to the two Arab tribes, Jerusalem. That is actually how they acquired in 1947 the Allied forces to give them the portion of Jerusalem. And the UN partitioned it into a Palestinian and a Jewish portion. So that concludes the argument that there is no way that the Jews took this land. They didn't even fight for it. They were given it on a silver platter. There were two Arab tribes that were already living there. And they have no right to this land, to start off with. Now let's look at the religious angle. The reason why the Jews think that this is belonging to them. We've already covered Genesis from the book of Torah. Now Ibrahim alayhi salam is a key figure in this. Remember that he was the one in Torah, in the chapter Genesis, their holy book, that was promised all the land between the Nile, the river Nile, all the way to Iraq was promised to Ibrahim alayhi salam and his descendants. Now, the Jews say that that's why it's ours. How many sons did he have? Ishaq and Ismail. Ismail alayhi salam is the father of the Arabs. So why is there more haqq, right, for the Jews who descend from Ishaq alayhi salam, and there is less right for the Arabs that are from Ismail alayhi salam? They should have an equal right. If we are looking at strictly religious terms. Tell me, if there's a father, and he has two sons, and he passes away leaving a property. Both of these sons have an equal right to that property. Now if one of the sons kicks the other son out of the property, is that justice? No. That would not be fair by any standard. They had an equal share. From the religious sense, they both have an equal right. The Jews and the Arab Muslims. One has not got the right to kick out the other. And this one doesn't have the right to kick out the first. Ismail alayhi salam's descendants was who? Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who was also a prophet that had come after the period of Musa alayhi salam and Ibrahim alayhi salam. So, in other words, if the Jews have a right, because of their lineage, their descendants of Ishaq, the Muslims have a right by being descendants of Ismail alayhi salam, an equal right. And one very important thing that I want to bring out here, if a Nabi or a prophet actually has a son or a daughter, their descendants, then it is conditional. It is very important to understand this point. The son or daughter need to follow what the father came with in order to be considered true descendants. We can see this mentioned time and time again. I will give you one example. If you have a descendant of a prophet that do not follow the way, the sunnah of that prophet, they are not even considered the son or the daughter of that prophet. Nuh alayhi salam. He is an example of a prophet that the Christians believe, the Muslims believe, and the Jews believe. He had a son who did not believe in Nuh alayhi salam being a prophet. Even though he was his blood son. When the flood came, what happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Nuh alayhi salam asked Allah, "Oh Allah, save my progeny, he's my son." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replied. He said what? "No, I'm not going to save him. He is not even your son." Why? Because he did not follow the millah of Nuh alayhi salam. The guidance of Nuh alayhi salam, he didn't follow it. إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِ إِنَّهُ عَمَلُ غَيْرُ صَالِحٍ. He is not of your family. He has actions that are not good. You can only be considered a descendant of a prophet or a family of a prophet when you follow the sunnah of that prophet. Even if he's your father, not because of blood ties. So today what I want to ask you, who can claim to be the real descendants of Ibrahim alayhi salam today? Can the Jews claim to be the followers of Ibrahim alayhi salam? Or is there another group that can claim, perhaps the Muslims, with more certainty? And I propose that it's the Muslims that follow Ibrahim alayhi salam till this day. Why? Because when the Jews had a prophet among them, Musa alayhi salam, the one who saved them from Fir'aun, even at that time, did they follow Musa alayhi salam? Did they follow him? Direct command being issued by Musa alayhi salam, they didn't follow it. And what are the Jews known for? They had already started worshipping a calf while Musa alayhi salam is among them. How is it possible for such people to claim that Ibrahim alayhi salam we're following? And then after him, for them to murder the prophets after him. How can they claim this? Who did they kill? Do you know? Either they killed them or they blamed. They say with fakhr, they say with pride that we kill prophets, the Jews. Let's look at the list of prophets that were killed or blamed by them. Zakaria alayhi salam, Yahya alayhi salam, murdered by the Jews. Lut alayhi salam, who blamed, the Jews blamed him that he used to do zina with his own daughters. Astaghfirullah. Sulaiman alayhi salam was blamed by the Jews. Isa alayhi salam, they blamed him to be a bastard child. Astaghfirullah. Zina was committed by Maryam alayhi salam. Who is making these accusations? Jews, Banu Israel. And this is categorical proof, my dear brothers and sisters, that even from the religious angle, Jews cannot claim to be the followers of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the two angles that we looked at in this khutbah, the first of them is that they claim that we were here before anyone else. And we've looked at historical accounts where the two Arab tribes were there much before the Jews had got there. Secondly, when we look through the text of the Torah and the text of the Quran, the religious texts, we see that they cannot even establish the millah of Ibrahim alayhi salam, who was promised that their descendants would get Jerusalem. So today we categorically prove one question being answered, which is what? The Jews actually have no claim to the land of Jerusalem. They have absolutely no claim. How they managed to convince the UN and the European nations in 1947 is beyond me. I am sure none of the Muslim scholars were consulted during this decision. This is how they got in 1947, the Jerusalem was broken into two, and those Arab tribes that were living there were told to move to make way for the Israeli state. It started off like a pea. And look at the map now. Israel is most of it, and that Gaza Strip that we hear over in the news. That is all that is left of the original people that were there. And my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, to conclude, these series of khutbahs have been designed just to inform you of the history. Because today we live in a time where us Muslims, we are cut from our history. We are cut from our roots. And it is my job to educate myself and you and do the research in order to understand how this history came to what we are today. On the 7th of October, 2023, something happened. You all know what has happened. There is another place, a war front. There are now two war fronts that have opened up. One in Russia and one in Jerusalem. We as Muslims, when one of us is hurt, the other ones suffer too. We are like one body. When one area of the body hurts, the entire ummah should hurt. What can you do sitting there listening to this? Charged up from this. What can you do? Number one, make dua. And we will make such a dua every single khutbah among us. Number two, reach into your pocket. Insert hand into pocket, take out money and put it away and give it to them. Thirdly, think in your heart that this problem has been going on for 16 years. This is the largest open prison. This was the words of the President of the USA. Saying what? When he visited Gaza for the first time, he said this is the largest open prison that I've ever seen in my life. Troops everywhere, and people are just being slaughtered and killed. Do you think just because this war happened, this has been going on for 16 years? I want you to think about every single population of people that say and claim discrimination. The blacks in America, in Africa, apartheid, in all these places. Till now they're writing books and making movies about the difficulties that the blacks went through, the difficulties that the Red Indians went through, the difficulties that the Aborigines went through, the difficulties that the Maoris and the Torres Strait Islanders went through. Till today our Muslim brothers are suffering. Till today, it's an active suffering. Discrimination is still going on. That chapter is not over. That chapter is still not over. And it is our dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes ease for our Muslim brothers that are over there. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enrich our hearts and our minds with the correct understanding of what our history is, and the correct understanding of how and what we are supposed to do in this time. Because this is happening now. 100,000 Jewish soldiers deployed with only one purpose. And that purpose is to annihilate what's left of this population. 200,000 troops on reserve. 200,000. Think about that number for a little while. And this is happening, and the UN can't do anything. The states cannot do anything, and the Muslim lands sealed. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.